when we look at life, we grow up with so much prejudice. A lot of us, if not most, if not all, would never say that we're prejudiced. Oh, I'm not prejudiced. You know, well, actually, most people, if not everyone, the vast majority of people grow up with huge prejudice. Prejudice against life itself. Prejudice towards life. We think we know what life is. We think we know what life is because from a young age, we've been told what life is. On one side, on one hand, we've been told what life is and what life is not. And on the other hand, from that perspective, we experience life in a certain way, and that experience becomes our definition, our conclusion of life. So our supposition is what we've been told, and then our conclusions are made while living life with that supposition in mind. It's like two walls, and here we are in the middle, and we cannot see past this one or past this. And so we think we think we figured it out because we're simply functioning between these two barriers. Our supposition of life and our conclusions, which are based on those suppositions that we've been brought up on. But a child who is born in this world has no suppositions. A child has no suppositions. A child is open to everything. By being open to everything, I mean being receptive to everything. Being receptive to everything does not mean accepting everything or thinking that everything is good. No. Being receptive to everything is looking at everything with a keen eye. Unless you look at everything with a keen eye, you will not know what is right from wrong. You will not know what is good from bad. You will not know what is healthy from unhealthy, unharmful to harmful. But the problem is we all want to put our children in a construct as soon as possible from a very young age. Because we don't want our children, somehow we think they'll grow up lost. Or it could also be, to be fair, that if we don't influence our children, someone else will influence our children. And that's also a considerable worry that people have. But the best kind of upbringing for a child is the upbringing that allows them to discover life as it is. Of course, the parents should be there for the children if they ever need any assistance, any help, but they should not be put in a box, is what I'm saying. I have had the privilege to grow up that way. Not because my parents were perfect. No parents are perfect. But they were very good parents. In the sense that they did not, well, they did not work too hard to put us in a box. At least not in a moralistic kind of box, religious kind of box, ideological kind of box. They didn't do that. We were very lucky to have a father who was very open. Who was very open to knowledge, to science, to discovery, to thinking. And all he wanted from us, his children, was to grow up with the capacity to think for ourselves. With the capacity to know how to think. He was not too interested in telling us what to think, but more interested in developing our thought capacity, developing our intelligence as he understood it, in the intellectual sense. So anything that had to do with thinking, different ways of thinking, different ways of looking at things, was always an interest to him. And it was always welcomed in our house. And so I grew up in that environment. Because I grew up in that environment, I was free from every doctrine, every dogma, every conditioning of that sense. But like I said, we also, there's some things like you have to go to school, you have to do your studies, and so when you go to school, of course, you will be put in a certain box in one way or another. But this thing never left me, this idea of this being, this way of being. From a very young age, I was surrounded by nature, and that was my favorite place in the world. I would just be in heaven whenever I was in nature, just like I am now. So I would spend most of my time in the garden or going to the nearby park / forest that was next to our place. It was a huge park, but not maintained like a park. It was more like a forest, but with a certain closure. But it was pretty big, Now it's more like a park. But at that time, it was more like an enclosed little forest. And I would spend my time there a lot. And for me, it was very clear, because we all are born with this intrinsic intelligence from the Creator, from the designer of life himself, who knows what he has instilled in us. He knows that once we are in a certain place, in a certain condition, the flowering of intelligence will happen. The flowering of consciousness will blossom. And so that was my beginning in this life. And I'm very grateful for that. So because of that, that was the key for everything that followed in my life. That was the main trigger that allowed me to seek and to know my Creator, our Creator, whatever you may call that Creator. and to come to a full and profound understanding, or overstanding, as we like to say, and a sense of beingness, a sense of coming back home, where intelligence beyond the intellect may blossom and connect you with the source of life. These dimensions are far beyond the thinking process, the intellect, which is why today and forever in religions they would ask people to just believe, because people from a very long time in human history were used to thinking. We're used to trying to make sense out of what we see as logical. So logic, the intellectual logic, cannot go beyond a certain point. And so religion in that sense asked people to believe, because when you believe, now you're not necessarily stopping at that limit. You're allowing your intelligence you're allowing for something beyond your intellect, rather, to touch you. If you cannot touch something beyond the intellect, at least with belief, you are open to anything that is beyond your understanding to come and touch you. The problem with belief is that you can believe in anything. It doesn't even have to be something true. That's the dark side of belief. And that has also been exploited a lot by a lot of religions. And that's why the word religion has a very bad or negative connotation today. And that's what we also call blind faith. Just believe. Just believe. Why? For the sake of believing. But in reality, belief had a purpose. And I'm not talking about putting your mind at ease, giving you hope. All those things are good, but they're okay. But belief in the original sense, which I came to know later in Christ, is synonymous with trust. And trust necessitates a certain evidence. You cannot trust someone for no reason. You cannot trust someone just because. Trust always comes because someone is trustworthy, right? Something is trustworthy. For something to be trustworthy, it has to have proven itself in some way that it is trustworthy. Otherwise, why trust it at all, right? So in Christianity, a lot of people don't know this, but in Christianity, especially in the Apostolic Churches, our belief, our trust is evidence-based. It is not blind faith. It is not blind faith at all. And that's very different than just religious belief that we see going on all over the place. In our religion, in Christianity, it's okay to doubt, because doubt is what brings you closer to the truth. Just like science. Science is based on doubt. If you're not allowed to doubt, how can you ever come to know anything? You need to be allowed to doubt so that you can come to know anything about anything. But certain religions today leave no room for doubt, shame you for doubting, attack you for doubting, and praise you when you believe blindly. That is very dangerous. That is very dangerous because now they are sending a message to people in general, especially their followers, that as long as you just believe, you're good, and we're good with you, and everything will be okay for you. But the problem is, when you do that, when you betray the consciousness within you, the light of God within you, when you betray that, and you trade it for a blind faith, something will always bother you inside. Something will always bother you inside. And when that happens, that person who's relying on blind faith and has built their life on blind faith, the natural consequence becomes fear, anger, aggression, and potentially violence. Because there's a deep-rooted fear in realizing that actually you don't really know, but you're just pretending to know. And you have invested so much in this false pretense of knowledge, which is not knowledge at all, because knowledge has nothing to do with pretending. Knowledge is when you have come to realize something, when you have witnessed something, when you are aware of something. It has nothing to do with belief, nothing to do with faith, and certainly nothing to do with blind faith. So the person who has this kind of blind faith will always be disturbed and easily angered, especially when his belief is questioned. And we see this a lot. We see this a lot, especially in the Muslim community, in the Islamic religion, which is based on blind faith. Because there's absolutely, like, their faith, the faith of the Islam, of the Muslim, is not based on any tangible evidence. It's not even based on historical evidence. Even when you question the historical evidence of that faith, you get anger, or an angry response, an aggressive response. You don't get an openness to explore. And right there, we can easily see a huge problem. And then they make it into a, you're not respecting us. You're not respecting our faith. You're attacking our faith. You're insulting our faith. All of that may not necessarily be true. Some people do that, sure. But that's not what I'm talking about. When you simply ask questions and push them to think a little bit about their belief and whether they have any evidence for that, they have no choice but to become aggressive, unfortunately. Not because they are aggressive. The aggression comes from fear. The aggression comes from being afraid, and being afraid to show that you're afraid. When you're afraid to show that you're afraid, you create a vicious cycle. And that fear of showing that you're afraid manifests itself as aggression, as anger, because now the aggression and anger, in one part, reassures you that you're not afraid because now you're angry, and it's also to give the impression, it's an unconscious thing, but it shows the impression outside that this person is not afraid, he's just angry. He's angry because now he's a victim. Someone angered him. Someone disrespected him. Someone attacked him, which is not necessarily true. So that is a huge problem in any kind of religion. But we see this a lot in Islam. Islam is not, it's not the only one, of course, but we see this very much in Islam. And that is because their faith is not based on evidence. They pretend, they like to think that it is. They like to act as though it is. But when you come down to the nitty-gritty, they don't have anything to give for it. They don't show anything. They can't show anything. And so it's very rare. It exists, but it's very rare for a Muslim to be humble enough and say, you know what, I really don't know. And yeah, there's no evidence for this. I need to look into, I need to question my faith now. Those people exist. Of course they do. That is what a true human being would do. But unfortunately, a lot of them, a lot of people are not like that. They just want to have faith because they've invested so much. They have so much vested interest in that faith. Their marriage was based on that faith. Their families are based on that faith. Their whole society, their whole position, their role in society, their person, their character, even the sense of who they are with themselves is based on that. It's not a joke when you really think about it. It's very understandable why they act that way. So it becomes a very delicate situation. These dialogues have to be made, especially when we speak about something that's true, something that can be true, maybe is true, we believe it's true. Now you have to actually show something for it. You cannot just say something is true and then when someone questions its authenticity, you all of a sudden play victim or want to get angry or want to fight. Like it's really ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. And it actually doesn't make you look good at all. It may be understandable from where you're coming from to act that way, but it's not justified. It's understandable but not justified. And this is why Islam is losing a lot of respect in the world. Because now its people, especially those who act this way, mainly, are acting like thugs, are acting like gangsters, are acting like criminals. When you say something is true, truth is for everyone. And everyone has the right to question anything that claims to have truth. Because truth is for everyone. And everyone everyone is worthy of questioning truth and looking for truth and seeking truth. So there's no room, when you speak of truth, there's no room for aggression. There's no room for victimization. Because once you speak about the truth, it's no longer about you. It's no longer about your feelings. It's no longer about your beliefs even. It's no longer about those things. It's about the truth. Now either you're interested in the truth and you want to seek the truth and find out what it is, or you're too caught up with yourself and you're like, hey, don't question my truth, don't say anything that I don't like about my truth, or else it's going to become personal. When that happens, it has nothing to do with truth. Really. This is why Islam is losing respect more and more in the world. And a lot of Muslims are leaving Islam and are joining Christianity, especially Christianity. Why? Christianity is based on the teachings of Christ, right? Jesus Christ. When you take Jesus Christ as an example, when you take him as a role model, he is the epitome of humility, of love, of honesty, of openness, of simply being human, because Christ was so human, right? So human that he was extra human, extraordinary. So ordinary that he was extraordinary, right? And that's what makes him divine, because he is so humble and so human. And that's what he teaches us too, that in order to touch our God self, our divine essence, we need to become so human. We need to let our humanity flourish to the point where something else is touched. Something of the transcendental is touched. But unless we are allowed to be human, fully human, and to have our humanity flower, our consciousness flower, we will never be able to touch that which is divine, which is within us as well. So, Jesus says, be like a child, you know? Be like a child, because the child has no conformity, is not brought up, does not have a supposition about life, and does not have a conclusion based on those suppositions. A child is free from those barriers, and a child is open and receptive. When you're open and receptive, you will see what is harmful, and you will avoid it. You will see what is good and godly, and you will go towards it, because that is in our nature as human beings. A child is given so much importance in spirituality as a whole and in Christianity, because a child is pure and free from that conditioning, which is exactly what allows that child to know God. So when we, even as adults, become or come back to our child self, our playful side, right? Our childlike nature. Our eyes, our inner eyes open up to the reality of life, which has nothing to do with the conditioning that we've been put under, that was meant to determine to us what life is. We can now see what life is, and by seeing what life is, it is so easy to connect with the source of life, with the creator of life, with the designer of life, and that is God, our Holy Father. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys very soon with another video. Please subscribe, give this video a like, about this topic, and ask me any questions you'd like, suggest anything you'd like me to talk about in the future, and make sure to check out my other videos, and I'll see you guys very soon.